are rising. We thought it was a lockdown, but they opened the fire. Them bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie. Oh my, time heals all, but you out of time now. Judge gotta watch us from the clock tower. Little tear gas clear the whole place out. I'll be back with the hazmat for the next round. We was trying to protest and the fires broke out. Look up for the secret agents, they be planted in the crowd. Said it's civil unrest, but you sleep so sound like you don't hear the screams when we catching beat down. Staying quiet when they killing niggas, but you speak loud when we ride. Got opinions coming from a place of birth, sicker than the COVID. How they did them on the ground. Speaking of the COVID, cause it's still going around. Won't you tell me about the looting? What's that really all about? Cause they throw away black lives like paper towels plus unemployment rate. What, 40 million now? Killed a man in broad day. Might never see a trial. We just want to break chains like slaves in the South. Started in the North End, but we in the downtown. Riot cops try to block, now we got a showdown. Down. You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. The bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie.
Turn on YouTube, dog. Look how they do us. Knee on our necks, bullets and backs, stimulus checks, strictly for blacks. History repeating. People scared to eat a chicken. Everybody going vegan, what they put in it. Look at the world we living in. They got a shook in it. You go on your jog, then your color might get you took in it. The man in the mirror can't look away. You gotta look at it. Black lives matter. So what it means when they shoot at it. Generation genocide. What happened to Enterprise? Hurt the man infiltrated. Black Panther re-energized. Ain't nothing to figure out. They trying to kill us out. If I take a nail, see my fist, I'm a killer now. Just think, bullshit, you gotta filter out. Are you really ready for the smoke like a Swisher House? Ready for the revolution? Who ready to ride? It won't be televised, so tell me who ready to die. If downtown going up, where we at with the shits? We at the liquor store, nigga, about to get us a fill. Oh, they about to start looting, grab the gloves and masks. Watch out for them tanks when they rolling past, shit.
Never understand why they do it. Someone cut the channel off the news before I lose it. I ain't even tripping, if you with it, then we lootin'. Help me put this Louis in the back of Suzuki. Oh, he had to break it down so smoothly. They gon' say it's not about race, but we moving. Oh, pow, cut the trade pound, had to put in my name. Wish a nigga play now. Any given day, I'll be headed to the pulpit. Say a little prayer, matter of fact, I need two. Ooh, won't he do it? Won't he do it? Ooh, this ain't 92, so we in the new rules. Niggas got hit, so we don't lose the projects. About to hit Rodale with my little cousin Marcus. Someone threw a whole brick in the Neiman Marcus. Help me put the whole mannequin in the charger. You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. The bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie. Ooh-wee. Downtown, we gotta stop. Cause they take us to the downtown. Well, I got hot with the rubber bullet tray down. Got it in my name now. I'ma shoot it up down. We gotta stop. Cause they take us to the downtown.
Water or something to do that. Hi everyone, thanks for joining the Writing with Machines meeting today. It's good to see you all here. So the question that I had up for you on the screen as you were listening to the wonderful Anderson .Paak, who is one of my husbands lined up that I have, you know, just in my pocket, just in case, you never know. My husband signed off on it, so it's fine. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on what challenges that teaching online is presenting in terms of offering students feedback and grading. Because this was a topic that came up a lot in the survey that we sent out to the whole department last semester. It was a big concern of how do we provide quality feedback, what role does grading have in our relationship with the students? All of these questions were arising. And I think now that we're fully online for the foreseeable future, this presents, you know, compounded challenges. So I see in the chat, some people are already sharing. And if you prefer to share by unmuting yourself, feel free. But Donna raises a great point about how we're sure that they're reading our feedback. I know that sometimes when we're in the on-ground classroom, we see a student flip to the end of the paper for the grade, and then sometimes just recycle it if they're earth conscious, or they'll just trash it, which is always heartbreaking because you're like, oh, I spent half an hour away from my kids writing comments on that. Um, so that's something to consider as well. Does anyone have a system that they use to ensure that students are reading? Do you incorporate reflections on the feedback they receive? Melissa, do you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee that they are reading it, but I just require revisions, and so then they can write a separate little paragraph about what they did, or better yet, I ask them to type in black where they added things and changed things in bold. And I think they like it. There's problems with it because sometimes they forget, and that's when I ask them, I'll just write a quick note about what you did. But I require them to go back and use my feedback. And also I like using the little comments message in Canvas where I can tell them, did you read my feedback? And maybe they're lying if they say yes, but most of the time I don't think they are. And they'll say, yes, I'll work on it. And then they'll do their revision. Mm-hmm. So just that kind of ongoing conversation with them online, I think does work.
Yeah.
Can I pick up on?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Tony, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to pick up on one of the points that Melissa made about the ongoing conversation. I add like a little step where in one of the writing journals they do for a given week, they have to respond to the feedback that I provided earlier in the week or the previous week. And so I asked them, you know, they have to write whatever it is, you know, write a response in which and I'm asking them to ask me questions about the feedback. What did they understand and can they change? And what sorts of comments did I make that they still need further clarified? So that the feedback becomes kind of foundational to an individual conversation I'm having with each student.
That's great, Tony. It's more of a dialogue then. And I like that you're asking students for feedback on your feedback. So it's so many layers of meta. You're such a major. But that's great. And co-generative dialogues is something that I'm going to cover today as a possible technique for ensuring that students are reading feedback, but also applying it. Does anyone else have methods that they're using online to ensure that students are reading feedback or applying it, things that have worked, things that you want to try but haven't yet?
Yeah, mine is kind of a combination of both Melissa and Tony, is ensuring that I ask them a question that they have to answer. You know, that's how I get my feedback, because I didn't just spend all this time writing this feedback, and you got to read it. You got to respond to me. And then with our bigger projects, like our essays in class, all of my essays are revision based, and you can always revise for a rescore. So that's kind of a check-in. And if a student submits something that has 0 revisions on it, I refuse to rescore. You stay with the same score because you didn't take the time to push yourself further or read the feedback. So it's a checks and balances system.
So Jabi, when you have them resubmit, do you have like what Melissa does of having them highlight changes, or are they writing a reflection on what they changed? Like, what do you ask them to submit?
Typically, their revision is going back and reading the feedback that I provided and making direct changes into the document. Highlighting them is a great idea because it would make it easier for me to see, but I have the ability to remember what they did or put their 2 drafts side by side and just check them against one another. That usually works, but I love the idea of like, no, you have to bold it and highlight it so I can see where that changes definitively. And that might work better if I have like Google Classroom too, where you can actually see the change take place. But I like the idea of highlighting or bolding it so I can see the change.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. I used that in creative writing last semester, and you know, mind you, we don't have a core or system in place for online creative writing, but I had them, you know, take a line that they had edited or revised and put them side by side, and then write a reflection underneath as to craft why they had made those decisions. So it's a little metacognitive. They become conscious of, okay, why am I throwing this word around here? Now, creative writing, it's more artsy fartsy, but I think that could apply to comp as well. Melissa, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it definitely does help to save time to be able to see what they did. because I used to always do it by hand, and then I would have their first draft that I'd written on and then make sure I had the second draft, and I could kind of quickly look and see if they used my feedback. But with the typing, you know, it's really, it can be difficult. It's great if you can remember everything that you said, but it definitely saves time when they highlight, or to me, it's just quicker if they just do Control B, type it in, you know, make their change with bold, but highlighting is good too.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
Jay,
Can I ask Jabi a question real quick?
Yeah, yes, of course. Go ahead.
So Jabi, I heard you say that you ask a question after you provide feedback. Can you give me an example? Like, is that what you do in the comments of the Turnitin or SpeedGrader, or where does that happen?
In the assignment itself, I usually leave it in the comments portion. I'll ask questions as a part of the feedback too, to get them thinking, but I specifically put at least 1 or 2 questions for them to answer in the comments feature, and then tell them they can either respond to that comment or shoot me an inbox message, or it might be something that I bring up with them when I conference with them. I'll ask those 2 questions again to kind of elicit that feedback in order to prepare them for the next assignment they're going to do.
So I like the idea that they can respond in multiple ways, and also in your discussion, like when you do a Zoom session, you can actually refer to that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing that. And I wanted to address what Teresa and Megan were saying in the chat. Teresa, do you want to kind of jump on and share what this comment means? I don't want to summarize here.
I mean, I think it's all of our concerns is that we become like the final word on writing, and I'm always trying to make a community of writers. You know, I feel like I don't want that to be artificial either. Like, well, you're going to grade me, so you're the one that matters, you know? So I emphasize the community of everybody's input is equally as important as mine, and I don't think that's untrue. And having the writing consultant and also going to the writing center, I just want them to have multiple eyes on it. Going online though, one of my concerns is that if I'm not in a Zoom room, they're going to be looking to me like an editor, proofreader. And I know that there's nothing wrong with that, to get all that very personalized feedback. Again, I overdo that too, but it doesn't feel good. And I'm afraid if I go hybrid or online, I won't know how to negotiate that community workshopping. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. Megan, did you want to add anything about how you're trying to build that community Teresa's talking about, with feedback between students rather than just from the instructor?
Sure. I share the same concerns Teresa does, where, man, I have a problem where, like, when I go and I give them, you know, feedback, I can't rein myself in. There's so much that I want to, you know, comment on, and I'm always trying to balance my critical comments, never mean critical, with like positive comments too. And I like that about the screencast thing, which will eventually, I'm seeing that we'll talk about. But I've been trying to start right away with like their initial discussion posts, like almost every discussion post they make where they have to create, you know, their own response. At some point, they have to talk to each other too. They have to comment on each other and then reply. So I'm trying really hard to encourage this community, especially with my asynchronous classes, of really reading each other's work, reading each other's comments and responding to them. And I've tried to make those, you know, really specific, but I still see those very general, short, you know, it's very clear that they're not really, you know, reading each other's comments. And so any tips you guys have for how to encourage peer-to-peer response and how to really foster that community?
Yes, thank you so much for raising that, both Teresa and Megan. One of the reasons why I shared with you all that very short article from Chronicle of Higher Ed about the secret weapon of good online teaching, this notion of discussion forums, is because that new, I think it's like AP 4105, I'm terrible with numbers, so don't quote me on that, but it gave kind of 5 major strategies for increasing not just our participation in discussion boards, but student to students, because AP 4105 says that we need students to interact too. So one of the things that, you know, I struggled with when I first started teaching online, and that I've observed in other classes, is that a lot of the discussion boards is a little bit of busy work. You know, read this, respond to this, and just post it, and I'll grade it. and that's it, rather than, you know, serving the purpose of a discussion board, which is to have the discussion. So in this Flower Darby, which I love because it sounds like a storybook name. So Flower is telling us, yeah, Megan?
Sorry, I just have to chime in. She was my professor when I was a freshman at Northern Arizona University. So
Whoa.
when I saw, I was like, oh my God, like I took a class there. It was exciting for me because it feels full circle at this point.
That's
You know, like
wonderful.
she's
Is
still
she
teaching
really
me.
like a Flower Darby? Is she just like, does she have
She's
wings
goth.
or what? Yeah.
She's like super goth. She's amazing, but she's
Oh.
really down to earth. She's like a gamer and she knows all of like the, you know, the internet jokes and stuff. So anyway, at least she was back then. So
Okay,
anyway, I was
cool.
very excited. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Oh, it's like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. We all know a famous teacher. One of the things that I liked about her article is that she raises the way that students interact with each other. Her example is that, you know, a student brings up being, I think, gay or non-binary, and that student's post doesn't have any responses. And so that's the instructor's opportunity to engage in the discussion board so that student feels seen and validated, so that all of our participation is strategic, that we're working to support all the students and kind of fill in gaps, but also facilitate conversation. Because I don't know if you have this feeling too, or this experience, oftentimes when we're asking questions that just have one answer, or right or wrong, or argument, counter argument, the students will kind of stop at their post, even if you're requiring a response post. So it's up to us to kind of jump into the discussion and say, well, why did you say that? Or do you have an experience that relates to that? Or how does this work? So just like how we are in the on-ground classroom, we kind of have to be those facilitators of discussions. And I always tell my students, I was like, you guys are being on a bad first date right now. Like, you're the date that I want to climb out of the bathroom window from, because you're not giving me anything. Like, I'm asking you a question and you're saying like, yeah, that's cool. So I think that she raises some good strategies, but part of why I assigned the 2 links that I sent out to you is I think there's a lot of room for disagreement and expansion too. So I wanted to ask you all, when you're asking for students to offer each other feedback and build this community in discussion boards or peer review workshops or other project-based assignments that you have, what are strategies that you're using to ensure that the students are communicating with each other and we're avoiding what Teresa said of being the sole voice of feedback or criticism? So how are you getting students to talk to each other? What's working and what's not? Tony?
I'll give just one. Just one thing is that one way I try to get the students to talk to each other is to not actually use their own work when it comes to providing feedback. So for example, in a discussion board, I'll post a paper, but it won't be a paper from any of the students in the class. And so what tends to happen is they tend to kind of agree on points or disagree on points, but in a sense, it's almost, and this may be problematic in ways too, but in a sense, what happens is that because they don't have a horse in the race, then they're more open to what it is they'll say. And I feel as if I can get like a larger variety of responses. And so for whatever reason, by using this kind of third-party paper, it tends to get them to be more open and more verbose about the critiques or even what they see that's happening well in the work that they're evaluating.
That's interesting. I actually have the opposite experience. So I always use the students' papers, and that seems to get them more invested. And usually I always do it anonymously, but the person's always like, that's my piece of shit right there. Come on, give me the feedback. So that kind of encourages them. But I think, Tony, you're absolutely right. I found a lot of success with the online class of assigning previous students' work as some of the readings. Of course, we're reading published work too, but
No, for
even
sure.
I had students published in Tide Pools, so I'm assigning that this semester. And
That's cool.
their discussion board question is like, which previous student did you relate to most? And the discussion boards are so long as a result.
Okay,
so yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm doing this thing right now where they're reading previous students' op-eds and they're trying to figure out what makes for a successful op-ed. So it's really cool because it is an evaluation in a way, but it's also, they're looking at the moves and the strategy that we're, they're talking about the evidence. They're talking about everything, but they're not looking at each other's work yet. They're just beginning to think about what theirs will be about. And so it's awesome because they're working from students' work. It's just not a classmate's work.
Yeah, that's right. And it makes it seem possible when they know that it's another student too.
Exactly.
It's not,
yeah, absolutely.
What are some other strategies that have been working for you all or not working for you all in terms of getting students to interact with each other?
Hey Jay, it's Mary here. I just wanted to share one thing that I do. My class is totally online. We don't have required Zoom sessions or whatever, but I still want the students to see each other. And so one way that I've done for them to do peer feedback is they will work in kind of a small group. I'll put them in groups, but then I'm asking them, and I show them how to do it, of course, but they actually have to make a video feedback to the student instead of just, writing comments or whatever. And I talk to them about setting it up and imagining you're actually having a conversation, although you are at a distance. And some of the stuff I get on that is just fantastic. It's a lot better than I thought it would be. Just how much that, you could tell they take their notes and then they're really trying to talk to the person, and then just the back and forth then starts from that, and they really appreciate each other's feedback, and they feel like they really are having a conversation with somebody. So that just works really well, and it's built right into the discussion board, super easy. And in a successful way that I've seen that it works.
That's awesome, Mary. Thank you for sharing that. Melissa, you want to jump in on that too?
Yeah, I want to ask Mary if she'd be willing to show us or to send us or share like how you set that up, like even if it's a written assignment that you do for them, or is it a video? Because I think that sounds amazing. I would think that
I can send you the I'll be happy to send the instructions and the little video that I have embedded in it where I'm giving them the guidelines for it. I think we're doing it for the first time next week. So if you would like that, could you just shoot me an email, because unfortunately I have to get off of this meeting because we're FA is doing a new faculty orientation. But I'm hoping if it's quick, I can jump back on before you guys are done. So
okay, cool. Thanks for joining us, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
And to add on to what Mary said, and this is going to lead us into the screencasting thing that I sent you. One thing that I did with Mana yesterday is I had them in the breakout sessions, and they were all sharing their screen for what they were starting to draft. And then the students in their group were annotating on the screen. So this was my way to scaffold building up to those individual video responses that Mary was doing, because then they get practice together of, okay, well, what's a good comment? How should I write on this? Like, what should I say? What kinds of questions should I ask? So by the time I'm asking them, I think it's in like 2 weeks when they're doing their full draft, to do a video for their classmate, they already have practice on what it means to annotate, what it means to offer feedback. So I think, as Mary said, any way that you can model it for them, whether you're completely asynchronous or a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, is a great way to preface making those videos. Because did someone want to say something?
I just wanted to echo, I think, the importance of the scaffolding. I don't think any of these strategies work if they're not carefully prepared for. If students can't do lighter versions first and kind of build up to the place that we want to be. I notoriously will come up with some very exciting idea and throw it in at stage 10 when I should have started them at stage 1. So I really endorse that idea of the importance of giving them a low stakes practice where they can get comfortable.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Jim. I started doing something, because, when I first started teaching, I'd give them a list of questions, like textbook questions for annotating each other's work or annotating a reading. And now I just go back to CNC Music Factory, like things that make you go, anything that makes you go, or like that becomes, what they respond to. So yesterday in class, we were watching this spoken word poet from Micronesia, and she just is a killer. She's a badass. And so I just had them sharing in the chat and through their emojis in Zoom, the lines that were standing out to them, the ones that gave them the chills, the ones they wanted to snap to. So I think if we kind of start just low stakes like that, and then we increase, the difficulty of the depth of feedback we expect of them, then that can be very helpful. So I wanted to transition to the screencast feedback video that I sent you all because, as Jim said, the scaffolding is so important because I think, God bless Jody Whitehurst and all the time she spends in screencast feedback, but the video that she posted in that article was super boring. I tried to watch it a few times and it was hard to listen to. She has a very pleasant accent, but if I was her student, I don't think I could listen to that full 8-9 minute video going over my essay. I think she has a good list of strategies on how to structure screencast feedback, but I think we need to make it a little sexier than that to ensure that our students are actually listening. So I wanted to hear how many of you have used screencast feedback either live in Zoom. Aaron says yes, less than 5 minutes, or through an individualized recorded video, and what's working for you. Aaron says, the time is important, less than 5. How do we pack all the meaning into 5 minutes? Like, what do we need to do in 5 minutes for them?
Can I chime in there? Oops.
Yes, Jim, please.
I would say 5 is too long. For me, where the videos have really worked is if they're 1 minute and it's one thing. So I'm using this video to share one thing I want to get your attention to. And then if I want to say more, that'll be in the rubric or the scored paper or whatever. But I have found that I get more attention and they're better at giving each other feedback when it's on a narrow issue. So let's just look at how well are quotes integrated to sentences, or let's just look at the claim, or let's just look, keeping it really, really narrow. I both for me, what I'm giving, and also for what they're doing, because I also have them video for each other. Feedback, they do screencast feedback for each other because you can do that now in Studio.
I think that's great. And if I know Jim was in one of my flex meetings on the Monday with Rachel Hastings from Communication, but she does a really cool job she has her threshold concepts or her common terms or feedback that come up in her communications classes, and she creates 1 to 2 minute videos and then has a playlist of it on YouTube and in Spotify, so that if a student has an issue with, I don't know communications key terms, but say if we take a threshold concept from our discipline, like building a thesis statement, we have a 2 minute video, then we can hyperlink that part of our playlist to the feedback that we're giving to a student. Because I think part of why video feedback is getting so long, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes, is that we're repeating a lot of the same stuff that we say over and over again. Work on your thesis statement. It's got to be more specific. It's got to answer the question in the prompt. Well, if we could just hyperlink those videos that are relevant to them, then we can focus our personalized feedback on more of the affective stuff. Like, oh my God, you wrote an essay about your partner dying. Let me talk to you as a human being for a minute. And then you can just watch the playlist stuff at your leisure. So, I think there's different ways to divvy it up and make it more digestible. Did you all have any other questions or ideas, things that had worked in offering screencast feedback?
I'll jump
Aaron,
in.
go ahead.
I do about 4 to 5 minutes probably per video for students, and this is like the final draft of a project. And I have to say, like, it was game-changing for me last year. It's the first time I did it, and I only really did the longer video like that for the first project that each class did. And then after that, I kind of scaled them back a little bit. But that first one, I had more students comment, like, basically, like, thank you for reading this. Like, they don't even sometimes think that we read what they write. And I swear, I think I had maybe like 5-10 people per class that were just like thanking me for looking at their work. So not only do I think they all watched the video, I think they watched the video and a lot of them really appreciated it. And it made us feel like we were talking a little bit more. And I like that. Like it's a dialogue. And when I do this, I don't write hardly anything on the essay. I just highlight as I go through, and I go back to those highlights and I kind of like talk a little bit. And one student in their final kind of eval said, like, I watched the videos for my essays like multiple times while the next essay, because I could like just keep, like, I didn't know what you meant the first time, but then like I went back and we had learned this and you said, this is how we do blank. And they kept like reviewing it. So like, I don't think they pick up their papers again half the time if we give it back in paper like that. And I think this they go back to. So it really it's something I'm going to do forever now, I think.
Awesome, Aaron. Thanks for sharing that. That's very heartwarming. You curated a little archive of videos that they're watching, like, oh, Professor Aaron. That's great. And you know what I think? When I first started teaching online, mind you, I was having a baby at that time, so I was kind of strapped for time and energy. So I started creating the rubrics in Canvas, and I think that's what a lot of us go to, when we're in SpeedGrader, click on the rubrics. But I think given what Aaron is saying and the impact it's had on his students, we could take each row on our rubric and create a video for it. So that way, at least they're getting that feedback, not just in a clicked rubric that makes it seem like we didn't really read the paper, but it's in a personalized video. They can hear our voice, see our faces, and it feels like it's more tailored to them. So I think that's great to create an archive like that. Any other comments about the screencasting stuff? So I just wanted to cap this off by saying it's really important that we manage our workloads too. So I don't think that this article saying we should create 10-minute videos for every student is realistic, because think of the time you have to prepare what you want to say before the video. Then you've got to wait for the video to process and render, and then do the closed caption so it's accessible, and it's 4 hours later and you've graded 4 papers. So we need to make sure that we're using screencasting wisely, and I think only for certain assignments as well.
Jade, for the record, you don't have to caption feedback on a paper. I mean, if you want to, that's great, but you don't have to.
I always feel like I should, though.
Yeah. Well, I think the argument that it's easier for the students when they can see it as well as hear it is really compelling to me. But I just wanted to say, just so people understand, legally, you don't have to.
Thank you, Lawyer Jim. I appreciate that.
I just didn't want people thinking we're telling them they have to caption feedback.
Yeah, I always do. Last year I had a student who was deaf, and so I always made sure everything was captioned for her. So I just got in the habit. But I think I also have that ringing voice in my head of people that were my teachers saying that they couldn't understand my English because of my accent. And so I was like, oh my God, I need to close caption everything. Because with Siri and stuff, and like on my Fire Stick, it never understands what I'm saying either. So I think that's my own thing.
And Jim Julius uses the UDL arguments, about how it's just another way to help students, So if a student is listening and reading at the same time, that's just another way you might connect.
Yeah, and Aaron says that you can always survey your students too. Like, does closed captioning help? Because I know some students feel distracted by it too. So that's something to consider, like what works best for your students and for you. Okay, so we're already halfway through. So I wanted to share some stuff from Zaretta Hammond, because I wanted to focus this session also on culturally sustaining pedagogy and equity. And Zaretta Hammond is kind of one of the go-to Melissa, the captions don't understand you either. Good, I'm glad I'm not alone. Like, what's wrong with my English? So Zaretta Hammond has this little chart here, this graphic called Ready for Rigor. And I know that rigor is a term and a concept that's been highly disputed when talking about culturally sustaining pedagogy, because it's weighted with a lot of the history of white supremacy in education. But I think what she's trying to use it as is to say that other ways of learning outside of a white male heterosexual perspective that's been pervasive throughout American education, it can still be rigorous. It's still just as intellectually challenging and productive. So I think that's why she's using it. And I just say that because I've been in some meetings where the word white supremacist has been thrown around really liberally. So I just wanted to share that up front, just to say that I think the notion of rigor is there to see that rigor can come in many different forms, that we're not reinforcing white supremacy or one way of seeing rigor, but that we're expanding that to include lots of different epistemologies and methodologies. So a couple of things that I wanted to highlight here, and I'll send all of you this slideshow, and the recording will be on the blog too. But one of the things that has been very effective for me is just the little twist of pronouns when we're thinking about what Hammond says about recognizing cultural archetypes of individualism and collectivism, I found that when I'm writing comments or now writing like this, or, doing video comments for students, just saying we instead of I think that you should do this, instead we are going to be working on this and we're going to achieve this together, has made such a big difference in the way that the students respond to the feedback. So I know that we oftentimes default to that individualism of the I and the you, but having that more familial collective we and us, I think has been very useful. And I think with that, we can help eliminate some of that race-based language, that kind of the subtle microaggressions that go into grading. Similarly, in the information processing, I think that process-oriented learning is really interesting in terms of incorporating oral tradition techniques into it. And I know that sounds like a total pivot away from what we're used to, especially when we're assessing writing on the page. But what I've been doing with Mana this semester is I've been really trying to use Canvas and all the tools that we're using online to break down the writing process a lot. So the points are not just for the essay itself, but breaking down, like they had to do a presentation for their brainstorm, and then they're building a map of that as their draft, and then they're incorporating it into Google Slides. And then so like all essays are now broken down into about 5 or 6 steps. And the oral traditions come through in that because they're having to interview each other. Yesterday, it was a little painful, like being at the dentist, but I had them interview each other. If they're saying that, the gym in high school was one of the places they want to write about, I had the students interview them about why that gym was important. What did it look like? What did it smell like? So it kind of becomes like an interview, like they're curating a story through the conversation. So I think any way that we're offering feedback along throughout the process rather than just at the end, it takes pressure off of us and alleviates a lot of our workload, but it helps them to engage with each other and have that working for them too. And that kind of goes with, I put here talking story, because I always start every essay assignment with just a discussion, kind of like a speed date or some kind of debate. The whole zombie apocalypse exercise that I do, where they have to argue that they should be the sole survivor of the zombie apocalypse. For some reason, that gets them talking for hours and hours, and they want to go back to it, and then they want to do it more in English 52 because they just want everyone to be eaten except them, which is very horrifying in this day and age. But I think any way that we can treat talking as part of the writing process has been very useful for me. And as I shared earlier, these spoken word snaps, I think feedback, if they can share it any kind of like in a musical or an auditory or a call and response way, that is a nice validation. So it might not seem like, oh, you're not getting constructive criticism if people are just snapping and clapping for you, but I think that's the first step to making them feel proud of what they have to say. And then they're more invested when they get to the part of the process where they have to offer the constructive criticism. So I just wanted to highlight some of those ideas from Hammond and share how I tried to incorporate that in my classes. To see how culturally sustaining pedagogy can work in offering feedback and doing grading. Yes, snaps, claps, and affirmations in the chat. Yes, yes, yes. Especially when we're reading text, or I'll show them videos of a performance or a reading of a text with the closed captions on, and then they quote it and put it in the chat. And oftentimes they're seeing their classmates share the same quote, so then they know, like, oh, that's something I should put in my notes, because if we're writing a paper about it, I know that's an important quote because 10 of us wrote that same quote down. So I think using the chat box for critical reading is a great way to get them started on their papers. Were there any thoughts or questions about Hammond's sort of rubric for integrating culturally sustaining pedagogy in terms of feedback? And
Jade, I just wanted to say, my students did group presentations last week, and one of the classes, the other students who were watching just went right into the chat room and were like, awesome, look at your visuals. It was just like this spontaneous affirmation, beautiful support. And when they were done, they got to read all these comments. I didn't initiate it. It's just that culture of that class. And chat isn't where I always encourage students to use chat, but this class just uses it organically. My other class, there was nothing. There was like silence after a group presented. And I was like, oh, this sucks, you know? And I don't want to be the only one saying this is awesome. So I kind of started modeling the chat, because that particular class didn't know that the chat is a place you can just like snap your fingers, right? And you're free. So that class, you know, again, I'm learning from the students in the prior class that this can be, and it just seemed to elevate that sense of positivity in that first class. And I'm going to try to I'm going to have to model that for the second class, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Some classes seem to understand that it's almost like a form of social media, that you can respond to everyone, show the likes, show the support and the love. And then others, I think, are a little timid because they think they have to write in full sentences or something. So whenever it's quiet in the chat, I always jump in and be like, yeah, bitch. And so they know that, you know, that it doesn't have to be some formal thing, but it's just the way that we talk to each other. So I think modeling in the chat is great too. Let me see what's going on in our chat actually. Invite them and honor the chat use. Yes, because if you think about it, I mean, I know that people feel all sorts of ways about the word count being lowered to 5,000 for English 100, but think about all the writing they're doing in the chat. That's a form of writing as well. That's part of word count. So I think we can expand the notions of where we see that word count manifesting. Okay, so I think I talked about some of this stuff already. I talked about the playlist of revision skills and videos. Oh, one of the things that I've been doing this semester that have been useful, in Vietnamese culture, we have what's called nhậu, and I guess the best American parallel would be called like happy hour or something, but I've started renaming my office hours that, and I find that students are a lot more comfortable just dropping in to talk about their lives or chat with me while they're on their break at work, and just organically out of that saying hello, questions come up about the papers or what they're reading, and they're like, I can't believe the character in this story did that. And so kind of reframing the way we present our Zoom rooms or our online office hours, giving it a different name so it feels more welcoming. I think that encourages that time for verbal feedback. In the MANA program, we also have Village Hour. And it was kind of weird this week because what they wanted to do is they wanted to watch my video that broke down the prompt that they're working on. So we sat in Village Hour and we watched my video together, which was extremely painful for me to listen to my own voice and see my face and doing all that. But they were able to stop the video and then stop and ask me a question while I was there in our Village Hour. So I think just renaming those spaces, it feels a little more informal and they can feel more comfortable. And I put mom and dad notes down here because I have one class that's totally asynchronous because most everyone in there works full time and has kids or is in the military. So I do mom and dad notes, and I always tell them, like, I'm a mom, I record things far too late at night, or I record things with a baby's head right here on my shoulder. So I just do individualized video feedback for them, and we dialogue that way so they can watch it at any time. So they'll send me a video of their questions, and then I'll bullet point their questions and keep that in the video when I respond to them. So I just wanted to offer a synchronous version of nhậu and Village Hour, and then asynchronous versions of the mom and dad notes, because I think that not one version works well for an entire class. It just kind of has to be personalized to the students. So I think what Erin said earlier of surveying your students to get to know what works best for them is really great. Let me see.
Just to chime in on that.
Yeah, please do.
So Jake and I did the military ally training last semester, and office hour means something completely different to military personnel than it does to like students. It's a bad thing. So being sent to the office is like you're in trouble. So office hours has a stigma for those students as well. So renaming them Village Hours, Now Time, virtual open room hours, whatever, giving them a different term like reaches out to that populace as well. So I just wanted to say, like, that's awesome. And yeah.
Thank you, Megan. I know that Jake can probably relate, and maybe others of you in the room too, but anytime I was called to anyone's office, it was because I was in trouble, and that happened a lot, you know, when I was a student. So I never went to a professor's office hours actually until I was in the PhD program. So I think it is very intimidating. So thank you for sharing that from the military background as well. Okay, so I wanted to go back to what we talked about at the beginning of our session about co-generative dialogue. So if you haven't heard this term already, it's something that's coming up a lot in the CSP discussions. And it's what Tony was talking about really, is where the students are also giving us feedback. So that way the feedback is not unidirectional, but it's more of a dialogue. So a couple of ways that students can offer feedback to their instructor. I'm just going to share some things that I've done, and please feel free to expand on this because I feel fledgling in this. I'm like the baby giraffe on knobby knees learning to walk. But co-teaching is something that I've done in Mana, especially for our men of color who tend to sit toward the back of the room, or now in Zoom, I have a lot of them who are, you know, smoking weed during class or laying in their beds, and that's like them being the cool guy who, you know, school's for pussies and like that kind of thing. I have them become the co-host and rotating co-hosts throughout the class in the semester, and they get an opportunity to fill in what we're covering in the class schedule for the day. Especially in English 52, I have a living syllabus that they're adding to in a Google Doc. But you can also do it if you have, you know, a schedule plan to say, you know, okay, you're going to be the co-host for today, and you're going to help define this term that we went over, or share your example of, you know, thesis statements that we covered. So giving them the leadership is a nice way for them to model what they're learning from us about teaching, but also adding their own spin to it. It's like they get to play the professor. So a lot of times I'm learning like, oh, I really like that activity you did. I want to do more of that. So it's kind of a nice, subtle way to get their feedback that way. The competition aspect of co-generative dialogue includes everything from group work and competing, you know, who gets to the answer the fastest, or who completes the best in-class writing together or whatever. But also in Zoom, you can enable in your settings the polling function so that you can be asking questions along the way to get their feedback of like, I know Sean Davis does it as, you know, what do you want me to keep doing in this class? And then what do you want me to stop doing right now? And so you can kind of poll them to see what's working for them with your pedagogies and practices and what's not. And then I also have them do competitions with Google Docs and slideshows and Prezzies, and they vote for each other on who has the best one, the most effective or memorable one. Yes, Teresa, the co-host stuff is really great for 52, especially for a small group. And I know that for those of you who were in our Flex Week department meeting and got to have the privilege of working with the National Puente Project, they use Google Jamboard. And we did it, let's see, what were we doing? Oh, things that people had said to us in education or something like that. But Google Jamboard has been really cool in my classes. I had the Mana students create a mural of who they are as Pacific Islanders, because in Google Jamboard, you can have them upload images, but they can also paint on it, and they can add the sticky notes. So it was a nice way to curate what we had talked about in class and have them visualize it. And then you have that document for them to write a reflection on. And we're going to do one mid-semester and then one at the end of the semester so they can see the changes. So it's a little bit of a metacognitive activity for them to reflect back on what the Jamboard has been kind of a museum of for them. You know, it's their museum wall. And I know some of our instructors, and I have in the past too, used Padlet as well, because Padlet has a lot of different yes, Erin, it was rigor in the Puente exercise. Thank you. Padlet is useful because you can create these walls and they can respond to each other. Has anyone used sketchnoting? Okay, so let me show you this video real quick. I often take a lot of my teaching advice from my stepdaughter's 6th grade teachers. Can you see the video, everybody? I'll just show you a little bit of this.
Why visual note-taking? Well, it enhances your memory and retention of information, mostly because you now have access to multiple cues, which will help you remember what you need to know. Visual note-taking improves your understanding of the lessons you're supposed to learn, because you're not just jotting down what the teacher or the book say, but you're exercising your brain by connecting the verbal material to the visual material.
Okay, so any avid comic book aficionado like Jabi will tell you that connecting words and images is a totally rigorous metacognitive exercise. So what I've done with this is I actually started this with podcasts. I assigned each student a class meeting where they had to take extra good notes on the class meeting, and they had to create a 5-minute podcast that recapped the main arguments of that class session. It was a cool idea, but it was fucking terrible because the podcasts were so mind-numbingly boring. They were just like, Auntie Jade said, it was terrible. I was so disappointed. So what I reverted to was this idea of sketchnoting, and it's something my stepdaughter is doing in middle school now. But you can have students be in charge of a class session or a week of class sessions, and they can sketch note what the main ideas from that session were, and then you can curate those in a Google Doc or on a Jamboard or on Padlet or even on an Instagram page if you have that for your class. That way, any students who miss the synchronous sessions or who had to be absent for a week, they have this visual and verbal archive of what was covered in the class. So it works two ways. It helps the students who weren't there, but for the student who was there and was doing the sketchnoting, they get this deeper level of understanding because they not only had to write the notes, but they had to draw their interpretation of the note as well. So I know that seems like, oh, that's for K through 12, but I think K through 12 is where we learn most of the shit that stays in our head. So why not employ those practices? So if you have an opportunity to try sketchnoting, I encourage it. It works way better than a podcast. So I need to learn more from Jake about how to do podcasts well, because mine was a dumpster fire. And so I just wanted to quote Hammond here. She says that we need to encourage students by leaning into productive struggle. They've got to muck around a little bit and they've got to feel like it's okay. So I think these Jamboards, Padlets, sketchnoting, anything that's kind of messy and all over the place, it forces them to lean into that productive struggle. Like they're sorting through their ideas, putting it together, and when it does come together, that synthesis is really, really rewarding, and they feel like they own the process that they got to, so that it's not coming from me, or it's not a traditional way. Linda Berry Syllabus, it's a book. It's a graphic book. Yeah, Linda Berry is a crazy artist and she's really interesting. But yeah, Syllabus is a great text. Thanks for recommending that, Jabi.
Real quick, Jade, if you don't have any artistic ability, can you do the sketchnoting?
Oh, like, yeah, even better. I love it when someone is not an artist because then they're stick figures and stuff. It's so much funnier.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can have them too, if they really don't want to draw, just have them do it through memes or images or something, because everybody can upload images. For our monomural, there was like 2 students who were drawing, but the rest of them just uploaded images. So that's fine too. And then I've just included a couple of links here for culturally responding pedagogy in relation to co-generative dialogue. So if you find that any of these strategies might work for you in terms of offering feedback and creating a grading dialogue, you can reference those there. So I know we just have a little bit of time left. So I just wanted to open this up to any comments or questions that you have about practices or tools that could be effective for culturally sustaining feedback and equitable grading. Did anything that was shared today really capture your fancy, or are there things that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share with the group? Aaron, go ahead.
I loved all these ideas. Like I didn't have a notes up, so I have my email and I'm just like banging out all these things that I'm thinking about. But something that I'm trying this semester that is new for me, and I haven't done it yet, so it might not work, but it sort of synthesizes a lot of what we just talked about, is collaborative Google Slides. So I'm going to have basically like my class they're in their writing groups, they're going to make a slide for each of the group members and say, like, basically create a slide that illustrates something they learned from the paper they just read or their classmates' paper. So they're like reading and then taking the students' words and putting them into another form so that the students are not only being heard, but they're also like having to respond to one another in a direct way. So they're like creating these like little slideshows. Then their groups can hang on to those as they go through the semester. So I'm still seeing how I want to scale it, but I think it's a combination of like using visual tools, using like collaborative work, and they're getting some of that peer feedback going.
Very cool. We should actually talk this semester, Aaron, because I'm having my Asian American Lit students create a zine at the end of the semester, and I was going to use Canva to create the zine, but maybe slideshow is good for presenting and showing their zine too. So we can talk about collaborative stuff, but I think that's a great idea.
Design in Canva. They could make it all in Canva, put it into the slide. Right?
Oh, there you go.
Just do that, and then you just flip through it. Yeah.
Dude, Canva can do anything, honestly.
It's amazing.
Everybody's like, how did you make your syllabus look like that? I was like, Canva.
You can have them uploaded to Google Sites too. That way we can access it later and see some of their work. Now the zine becomes public work as well, from the slides to the sites using Canva of technology.
That's awesome. And I think it's wonderful too to, my goal with the Asian American Lit class and the Mana stuff is we should be creating archives, because like Jake has done this amazing job of archiving all of the oral history project stuff with the veterans. We could all do archives like that for our classes, so that students can read the work of those who came before them, but it also expands our library's resources too. Any other thoughts on ways that we can make feedback and grading, grade back, culturally sustaining and equitable, both for our students, but also for ourselves?
I like the co-generative idea, and I actually stole this from Jabi when he posting your video, but enabling the feedback so that the students can have a conversation that follows the feedback. So it's not just me sharing a video of the lesson, but the students can, digest that and then contribute to it also with one another.
I also have them do that when they post videos as part of an assignment too. So they comment a lot more on each other's videos that way when that's enabled. So yeah, I think that's a great little tool. Just click, enable comments at the bottom. Any other ideas in the couple minutes we have left together, or any questions? Is anybody using a tool, like an online service or any kind of hardware or software that's working really well this semester that they want to share with us?
I use Discord. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Discord. It's a really cool, you can use it just as a website, or you can download the actual app or program on your computer. It's like a peer-to-peer sharing network, and basically what it's created is this like outside of Canvas community for my students. And I have channels set up for all of my classes, and within those channels I have like memes and college talk and assignment chat, and my students really have a good time like sharing their interests and hobbies, and a lot of them have like Etsy's and DeviantArts, and they're sharing their outside interests, and it's created a lot of rapport and community building with my students. So if you guys haven't used something like Discord before, it's something, just an idea to keep in your back pocket for really building, again, that that community with your students.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Discord. Cool. Any others? Check our chat. Oh yes, syllabus on Amazon.
Did you, at the beginning of this meeting, when I showed up late, did you say that these slides will be available somewhere?
Yes, and I also said a lot of bad things about you before you did.
That's why I waited for those 10 minutes to get it all out.
That's how I start every meeting, right? Yeah, I'll make the slideshow available along with the recording, and I'll be posting them on the Writing with Machines blog, but I'll also email it out to the whole department. Any other closing comments, questions, confessions of love, deeply held secrets, ATM pin codes? You can't do this just on Friday because now I have to go. Oh, sorry, Aaron. There goes your Saturday. There goes your Labor Day weekend.
Pretty much, right?
We're gonna be tinkering around with Discord and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, just
Well, I thank you so much, all of you, for joining in and keeping the Writing with Machines community of practice going. I encourage you to share any cool ideas that come up this semester on our blog. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me. And I'll be sending out invitation for the next month's Writing with Machines workshop, which is going to be more of an open-ended dialogue. And we're going to discuss a couple things that have been coming up departmentally too. So if you want to have power and voice in saying what happens with our Writing with Machines budget, show up to the next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay,
Jade, before they make budget decisions, you know we need to stand behind the Chromebooks and for students.
Yes, so that's what I'm hoping, that if you all attend next month's, we're gonna come up with some kind of statement or something with all of our names behind it, because we really need to push to make sure money is going to students. Like I don't think most of us need money for a computer or anything. Our students need it. So that is my goal. We're gonna do some grassroots shit right now. We're gonna get all guerrilla warfare. So yeah, we'll make sure it's going to the students. So thank you, Teresa. Thanks again. Have a safe Labor Day weekend, socially distance, wear the masks. America, yay. Bye.
Stay cool, guys.
Later.